Okay, so now we've tended to the motor side of the locomotive and tried to improve her performance. Now we're going to start having a look at improving her general looks. So if I swap that for the upper body, what we're going to try and have a look at now is whether we can fit lights to the front of the locomotive and fit some cab lighting as well. Okay, so in order to try and fit some lighting to this old model, I've bought some equipment from Express Models. Now this company do a range of different lighting kits and LEDs for use in models like this, and they do a whole range designed for each particular model, whether it be a Hornby or a Bagale model. They tend to do one that will probably suit it. So when they send it to you, they send it with a little circuit board and all the LEDs and everything all wired up, ready for you to just wire straight into the chip. But for the cab lighting, I'm going to have to do that myself, and so I've also bought from Express Models a really tiny micro LED. You might just be able to see. So these mini LEDs come pre-wired onto two very thin wires that go off the back there, that allow you to obviously wire this into your locomotive and attach it to the DCC chip. But before I just delve straight in and start having a go and start soldering everything together, I think it's important to have a little trial run with the model to make sure that the light is in the right position and to make sure that it's of the right brightness, so that we don't cause it to look a little bit odd on the track. So what I'm going to do first is just use a little bit of blue tack to fix the LED in place in the roof of the loco, attach the resistors that we need in series to stop it blowing the LED, and then just attach it up to some wires on the track so that I can simulate what will happen and I can see whether the lighting is suitable or not. So when you come back to me in a second, I'll have that all in place and we can have a trial run. Okay, so you should just be able to see now inside. I've used a little blob of blue tack to hold the LED in place and led the wires off down the side of the body. And with this particular model, it's quite easy to fit the lighting in the roof because the cab section, the internal moulding for the cab section there, has this large section cut out of the back. So I can just slot this back into position and it'll just sit and straddle the LED. Now what I've done on the other side, I'll just bring that into shot, the positive wire for the LED, which in the instructions that come with the LEDs, it says that the positive is the coloured wire. So bringing that one off, I've wrapped it around the leg of this 1 kilo-ohm resistor that again also comes in the kit, but that's there to stop the LED blowing. So if I tried to put the full sort of 15-16 volts of the DCC straight through that tiny LED, it would just pop and destroy the LED straight away. So this resistor just tones down the current flow enough and tones down the voltage to be able to make it a little safer. So I've attached the resistor in series and then attached that to the arm of our wheel cleaning kit that's then attached to our rolling road, that's then attached to our decoder. So it's a little bit haphazard, but it's enough just to let me test what it's going to look like and see if I'm happy with it. The other wire on the other side, a little black wire, and then just going to attach with my finger to the other side of the cleaning brushes so that it completes the circuit and the LED will light up. Okay, so if I touch the connection there, we can see the cab lights up. But there is a little bit of problem that might show up a little bit clearer if I turn the lights down. So if we just turn the lights off. Okay, hopefully you can just about still see the model, but if I make that connection again, you can probably see the problem that I could spot before. Inside, it looks great, the whole cab's lit up, but because it's made of a thinnish white plastic and there's no paint on this end of the model, you can also see the LED straight through the roof, which obviously isn't realistic and kind of ruins the whole effect. So what I'm going to try and do now is just stick another resistor in series, so to turn it into 2 kilo ohms, and see whether that tones it down enough to make it a little bit better. Okay, you probably can't see in the dark, but I've now strung another resistor into series to try and tone the voltage down even further. So I'll make the circuit again, and that is a bit better. I'm not sure how well it shows up on camera. I think in this lighting it might look a little brighter than it really is in real life. But inside the cab, it now looks a little bit more realistic. It's not quite so bright, but it's still bright enough to come through the roof there. So we're going to need to treat the model in some way in order to stop that light seeping through, and the same happening at the sides here and through the doors here, which again you might just be able to see on camera. So what I'm going to do is paint the inside of the model in a matte black finish. Okay, with the lights back on now so I can see what I'm doing, I've got some black matte paint here, model paint, to try and treat the inside of the locomotive here at the top, where the plastic is just its base white colour. By painting it black on the inside, hopefully it should add enough of a sort of shield against the light to stop it bleeding through. I'm not going to bore you with all my trials on camera, but just to check that this was a likely way to solve the problem, I did also rig up the light at this end, at the rear cab, where obviously the white plastic already has a layer of paint over the top as part of the livery, and when I did the same thing at that end, you couldn't see the light bleeding through, and it looked much more solid. So I'm hopeful that this will work, but my one concern is that because this plastic is obviously thin enough to let light through, that if I paint it black on the inside, it might have an effect on the outside, and it'll start to slightly change the colour and maybe make this white into a slightly off grey. So I'm just going to test a little patch first, just at this top edge where the dark grey part of the livery meets the white, just to see if I can notice any bleed of that black through. So with just a small amount of paint, like that. I've now got a band across where that white section starts, so I'm just going to leave that to dry for a second and then see whether I can notice any effect on the overall model. Okay, I've left the paint for a little while now, and I can't notice any difference on the outside. Will's had a look as well, and we're both pretty happy that it's not having a noticeable effect from the outside under normal lighting conditions, but when we do shine a bright light through the bottom, just to have a look, it does seem to do its job, and you can see a dark shadow where that black paint has been applied, and it's stopping the light bleeding through. So what I'm going to do now is carry on painting the rest of the inside of the model, and cover up all of this white section at the front, so that I've got that light barrier ready for my cab lighting. Okay, so as you can see, I have now painted the entire inside of the body in a matte black finish. I decided to paint the entire inside rather than just the ends, because it seemed to make sense. I had the paint out, it wasn't really going to hurt to paint the whole inside, but it means that it protects the entire length from any light bleed whatsoever. It's had 2 coats and been allowed to dry completely overnight, so all that remains now is to put the light back into place temporarily using a bit of blue tack like I did before, and run another test to see whether it still bleeds through the roof or whether we've now done enough to be able to proceed. Okay, so I've put the LED in place with a little bit of blue tack, put the small cab section back in place so it's going to be realistic as if it was all back together, and I've wired it in to my little temporary loop, and if I turn the lights off completely, you can see that black paint has had the desired effect. So there's not a lot else to see, but you can just see the glowing light emitting out from the windows in the cab, but you can't see anymore that light bleeding through the roof at all. But from the front, we've got a nice lit up cab. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to continue now and actually fix these into place properly and permanently, and put one in the rear as well so that both ends can light up. To do that, all I'm going to use is a little bit of glue to hold the LED in place and lead the wires off down the back, and that should be enough because they're so tiny it's not really going to need a lot of fixing. Okay, so we've zoomed in close so you can see what's going on with these very tiny wires, but I've first of all soldered 2 of our 1K resistors together. Obviously I could replace it with a 2000 ohm resistor, but haven't actually got any of those to hand, so it's easy enough to just solder the 2 together in series and create the same equivalent. And then to the end of that little bundle, I'm now going to attach both of the positive wires to the LEDs. So one will then go off to the front cab, one will go off to the rear, but they can obviously share a common positive through the blue wire of the DCC chip, but their negatives will be attached to different wires so that we can control them independently. So I'm going to solder both wires to this one end of the resistor bundle, and then I'm going to use some heat shrink tubing to cover the whole thing over and try and make the joint a little bit neater. Okay, and so with those positive wires attached to one side, I'm now going to attach a piece of fine DCC wire to the other end of the resistor bundle so that that can then go off to our chip. Okay, and so all the wires are very fine, as you can see, but in the middle there we've got our nice tidy electrically insulated bundle with our 2 resistors in series going off to our 2 positive wires for our LEDs. And there we have it. I've now glued the 2 mini LEDs into place. Quite a fiddly little job trying to keep it in place and let the glue set, but they're both fixed now, and I've managed to use a few small little cuts of insulation tape to just hold the positive and negative wires along the roof there. And so if I just touch that one, I've got one in the front, and touch there, got one in the back. So now we need to turn our attention to the head and tail lights using the kit from Express Models.